So now that we have the carb clean, reassembled, and back on the engine, and the engine starting and running and idling, it's time to make sure that we go back and retune the carburetor to suit its newly clean condition, as well as I did disturb all the screws so they're not where they used to be. And we may as well readjust everything and make sure it's running where it needs to be. So before we get into the process of tuning it, and I will go over how to adjust the screws, or how I like to adjust the screws, let's talk about some of the tools that we're going to be using here for the process. So let me direct you down here. I've got some of the tools that I typically use set up here, along with some PPE, which is also a tool in my opinion. I have a tachometer. I like this digital one because it's really nice, and it's got a large digital display that makes it really easy. We have other tachometers that I would show you as well during class. Some earmuffs, because you're going to be right next to the engine running at full speed or top no load speed, so it gets to be pretty loud, so some hearing protection is in order. And then several different types of screwdrivers depending on your carburetor, whether you need a smaller flat blade or a larger flat blade or a Phillips, or what I really like, especially for the bottom load adjusting screw, is this one right here. So it's a flat blade screwdriver, but it's got a sleeve around it, so that way when the whole carburetor is vibrating and you're trying to adjust it, your slotted screwdriver doesn't slide out the edge of the slot, so it stays engaged with the screw a lot better. This one is too big to fit the idle screw, but it works really nice on the main load adjusting needle. For this particular carburetor, which I have a sample one right here, which is very similar to the one that's on the machine. For this one, the bracket on the machine is really close to the idle mixture screw here, so I can actually just rest the edge of the blade against the arc, and you'll see that when we get back over the machine, or you can recall that from a previous video. So, but let me use the sample carburetor here to go over the presets for the carburetor. You can see that this one has been used and abused here a little bit. It's missing its Welch plug, and there's an excessively large hole. Alright, so let's go over the presets. I referenced the manual to verify that I got the correct presets for the correct carburetor here. And so how we do this is I'm going to show it to you here because I think it's going to be easier to see than on the machine with all the extra stuff. And I'm going to just rotate out of the way so we have kind of a clear background here. And so how I'm going to do this here is I'm going to gently turn this idle mixture screw in until it fully seats and stops turning. I'm using 2 fingers to turn the screwdriver handle. This one was out quite some ways. Okay, and then once it hits bottom of its seat, this particular carburetor is 1 full turn out, so I usually do it in half turns, so half, 1 full turn. Okay, and same thing for the main screw on the bottom. I'm going to turn this in until it all the way seats, and then this one comes out 1.5 turns. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's how I do the presets. And then as far as the idle speed goes, I usually have this set wherever it previously was, if I believe that the machine or the engine was running well before it had its problems. But if this was noticeably disturbed or removed or taken out for cleaning, I will usually turn it in till it just touches the throttle shaft, and then I'll give it a half a turn more so that it just cracks the throttle. And then I kind of adjust it in quarter turn increments from there till I get a stable running engine. And then once I've got the carburetor tuned in, then I come back and adjust the idle speed to either manufacturer specifications or to where I achieve a stable idling engine that doesn't want to peter out and die, or idle so fast that the belts start to try to engage. Okay, so let me point you back up at the carburetor of the snowblower here, and we'll talk about the actual tuning process of it. When we go to adjust the carburetor, we have our 3 screws. We have the main needle on the bottom, we have the idle mixture screw on the side, and then I have the idle speed screw at the top. And so we are going to work from the bottom up here. So to start out, first thing I'm going to do is start up and run the engine to warm it up and get it close or at normal operating temperature. And I'm going to move the speed selector switch to the high speed position, and we are going to adjust the main mixture screw first at high speed until we're satisfied with that, and then we'll bring this down the speed control lever to the idle position, and then we'll adjust the idle mixture screw. And once we're satisfied with the idle mixture screw, then we fine-tune the idle speed with the idle speed screw. Okay? So that's the order in which that we adjust those. And then now for the actual adjustment itself, for let's say this high speed screw or the main mixture screw here, so I'm going to put this up into the high speed or full speed range for the speed selector. I am going to rotate the screw clockwise, which is going to turn the screw in and up into the carburetor, which will result in leaning out the mixture. And I'm going to rotate it clockwise and track my turns until the engine starts to run erratic or roughly. And then I'm going to note that position. And then I'm going to then turn the screw counterclockwise, which would open it up and bring it down and out of the carburetor, and rich in my mixture. And I'm going to rich in my mixture till the engine runs nice. And then I'm going to go a little bit further, and I'm going to rich in the mixture till the engine starts to run rough or erratic again. And I'm going to note that screw position. And then I'm going to adjust my screw to the middle of that position. I'm going to let it stabilize, and then I'm going to adjust it slight rich, like a 1/16 of a turn rich. I'm not going to try talking during the procedure here because I don't think you'll be able to really hear me over the engine. So I will either do a voiceover or I will do a show and tell after. Once the engine's running and warmed up and ran at top no-load speed for a while, it's going to be time to start making adjustments to the main mixture screw. We're going to start out turning clockwise, which is going to drive the mixture lean. And I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to do a little bit and then wait, a little bit and then wait, because you need to give it a little bit of time for the engine to catch up to the new mixture settings, or time for the new mixture to take effect with the engine. And so I'm just slowly turning it about 1/8 of a turn at a time, and then waiting a few seconds for and observing for any changes in the engine. And then right about here I can hear the engine not as smooth and erratic, and so I note that point and I start turning back the opposite direction towards the middle set point. And then I'm going to keep going now counterclockwise, which is going to richen my mixture, and I'm going to keep turning counterclockwise until the engine starts to sound a little less smooth than what it is. And then I will note that point, and that's coming up right about here. You can start to hear it a little bit. It's no longer as smooth as it used to be. And then now I figure out what the halfway point in between those two are, and I set my screw to that, which is actually really close to where the preset is, plus a little bit rich. And so that I have the main one set. Now I move on to the idle. So I bring the speed selector down to idle, and I perform the same procedure. I'll start by going clockwise, which is lean, and I will go and continue to slowly turn and wait until the idle sounds erratic and the engine starts to pop a little bit right about now. And then I'll go back and start going rich slowly and waiting in between adjustments until the idle starts to sound a little bit uneven, like around here-ish. And then at that point I note my position and I figure out what about halfway back is. And then I've got the idle set right about here. Once I'm happy with the idle, now I can take a look at idle speed. I can tell it's idling a little bit fast, so I turn it down before I even bother checking the RPMs. And then I get out my attack and I hold the yellow pickup near the spark plug wire in the spark plug. And you can see it's idling right around 2000 RPM to start out with. And the goal is about 1750 to 1850. Wherever it seems to run pretty smooth without wanting to stumble or die. And so that's a make an adjustment, wait for it to settle out, make an adjustment, wait for it to settle out type thing. Best you can. Now, because the engine's a little bit older and a little bit more worn, especially where that throttle shaft was loose that I pointed out in a previous video, that looseness in the throttle shaft is letting in a little bit of pirate air, especially under high vacuum situations such as idle, and that is making the idle a little bit less stable than I'd prefer to have, which adds a little bit of time in trying to dial it in. And now I'm going to perform a snap throttle test where I hold the throttle shut and let it snap open to wide open throttle, while paying attention to how the engine responds to the throttle snapping wide open suddenly. And what that does is indicate to me how well the two mixture screws, the idle and the main mixture screws, are balanced with each other. And that kind of shows how the engine will transition from idle ports to the main jet. And so make a small adjustment to add a little bit of fuel to the idle so that it responds a little bit better. And then here I am checking the maximum engine speed, or the top no load speed, which would be the governed engine speed here. And I'm looking for somewhere around 3400 RPM, which I had. And then I bring it back down to double check idle, since I made an adjustment to idle. And so I turn the idle mixture screw, and now you can see that the idle mixture is up again. So now we'll have to adjust the idle speed screw. To reobtain what we want for a desired idle speed. $17.30 is a bit on the low side, but not bad. I'll do another snap throttle test to verify that the screws are adjusted to the way they should be, and observe how the carburetor and engine react to the throttle being opened suddenly. We'll recheck our settings to verify that they are staying where we set them. You can see here the idle is a little bit up again since there was another adjustment made. And as a result of the adjustment, you can also see that the top no load speed is up a little bit to about 3,500 or so, a little bit more than 3,500. And so here, didn't realize my arm was blocking the screwdriver, but I was making a governor adjustment to the top no load speed to try to bring it down a little bit. I brought it down some, but I wanted to try to bring it down a little bit more, and the governor screw wasn't really responding, so after making a second attempt at adjusting the governor screw and the engine not really dropping speed, I know that if I were to richen the mixture a little bit, that would bring the speed down a little bit as well, because engines typically tend to run a little bit faster when they're a little bit lean. So in a moment, I make a slight adjustment to the main mixture screw to add a little bit of to richen the mixture at top no load speed, and that will bring the top no load speed down to where I want to. So this is the second attempt at adjusting governor here, and then now I should be deciding to richen the main mixture just a little bit, like an eighth of a turn. So after that main mixture's been richened, you can see here now we're pretty close to 3,400 RPM for a top no load speed, which is about where I was hoping for. And once that's all set and verified and I'm happy with all the settings, the last thing to do would be to park it outside in the cold weather and verify that it starts and runs proper in cold weather, and ultimately we'll need to test it under load to make sure that it can perform under a load. You can see the idle bounces around a little bit, but it's majority in between 1750 and 1850, so I decide I'm okay with that. Last snap throttle test, as long as it's a reasonable transition from idle to top no load speed, the screw should be pretty well balanced. And we should be set.